Welcome to part 3 of our look forward to Breeders' Cup 2012. We've already taken a look at what you need to win a race at Santa Anita, and we've taken a look at some of the horses who could well be flying the flag for Britain. But now, in the company of Churchill Downs' own Rachel Candelora, a look at some of the home team, the horses to keep the right side of who are representing North America, and 5 horses on Rachel's watch list. Let's take a look at those now for you. The first of whom is a horse who was formerly trained in Britain by John Gosden. That's a horse called Questing, now with Kieran McLaughlin. Then we'll take a look at Contested for Bob Baffert, another Bob Baffert trainee in Rolling Fog, Tapit Fly for Dale Romans, and Sri Lanka for Dick Mandella. But starting off with a horse that many of our viewers will know, Questing, who has become, quite simply, a different horse now that she's in North America.
Yeah, she used, as a 2-year-old, she was running under the colours of Princess Aya. She's gone over, she's now become arguably the best runner in America right now, running for Godolphin. She's basically coming to dirt has been her awakening. They put her on turf her two runs this year, 4th, 5th, didn't run well. All of a sudden, she's in a high-level claimer, 1 mile on the dirt at Belmont, destroys the field. Throw her straight into a Grade 1, destroys the field. Throw in another Grade 1, she is the top 3-year-old filly. She's the top 3-year-old. She is arguably, some say she's better than most of the other ones. And I would love, she's already been pointed, they've already said she's going to the Cotillion at Philadelphia Park at the end of this month, and then she's going straight to the Ladies Classic.
And therefore, you would fancy that, as a lot of the horses are falling by the wayside with regard to the Ladies Classic, she comes here with a great chance. We've seen the likes of Royal Delta come back, and then, again, like many of the colts this year in America, one awesome run, then flattens.
Yeah, Royal Delta is one of the ones, just like everybody else who's at this top echelon of the distaff division. They win one, they come in second, they fall off the grid, they run third, they win. They've all just been beating up on each other. Questing has not been beaten up on anybody. She's been beaten up on everybody. They were actually, Kieran McLaughlin, the trainer who's got her now, was actually disappointed that Godolphin had Alpha to run the Travers because they wanted to run her in the Travers. And if you look at the times, it wouldn't have been a dead heat between Alpha and Golden Ticket. She would have won by about 5 lengths. And that was disappointing for everybody, but you know, you got to play the team game. So she's going to go and run against the girls. I'd fancy her in the Classic personally, but as she's won at 1 at 1.25 miles. The Ladies Classic back to 1 1/8 miles, but she's won over that distance, no problem.
Is she quite simply one of the most likely home team American winners at the Breeders' Cup Series, period?
I would say yes.
Okay, that's Questing then, who's going to be going for the Ladies Classic, formerly known as the Distaff. Now we're going to take a look at a couple of Bob Baffert trainees. And I know a horse that Rachel absolutely adores, a horse called Contested, who is one of the fastest distaffers currently in North America. Yeah,
she'll go straight for the filly and mare's sprint, but her claim to fame around Churchill is she's the Baffert beer money horse. As every Derby weekend, Bob Baffert sends one that cannot lose. Normally it goes off 4 to 5, 3 to 5, something stupid, but you lump on and you get a lot. She was it, and she's done nothing but win Grade 1 since then. They tried her at 1 1/16 at Belmont. It's arguable whether the distance was a little bit too much for her, or some horses just don't handle the sandy Belmont surface. She didn't run well. They've dropped her back to 7 furlongs in the test stakes at Saratoga on Travers weekend. She destroyed the field, and back California, she's won over Santa Anita track 3 times. 7 furlongs, she's won over a couple times. She's a Grade 1 winner. There's no other sprinter in the country in this division which can touch her.
And one thing that many people may ask is, how does she handle the prelims? Because it's all very well and good being a champion sprinter, but does she tend to boil over? Does she wear a heart on her sleeve? The one thing about her, having won already at Churchill on the Derby weekend, is she looks absolutely bomb-proof. She doesn't turn a hair in the prelims.
No, she just goes in. She's actually she looks ungenuine, and she looks plain. Her head's down, her ears out. She's just kind of a gawky little filly, and she just walks there, doesn't turn a hair, but not in that good sense. You just kind of get the sense, what's the old milkman plugger doing in the field? And then when the gates open, she's normally in front by about 5 lengths before you're trying to figure out what exactly has gone down. And she very much runs up front, and which very much suits the Santa Anita surface. And she's proven that she can get into a speed duel and still just run away from it at the end.
Okay, contested then, a major player in the fillies sprint, run over 7 furlongs, the extent of the one-turn races at Santa Anita. Bob Baffert also has one of the big talking 2-year-olds of the year in North America in Rolling Fog, and obviously therefore a legitimate contender for the juvenile.
Yes, this son of Posse has come out of nowhere off a maiden win and won the Grade 1 Del Mar Futurity, which is a win in your end of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last weekend, which over 7 furlongs on the cushion track. But the more interesting thing, because Baffert farms Grade 1s at Del Mar, and I think he won 13 this season, and so just not to just jump on the bandwagon, Jim Barnes, who's the assistant trainer, said they're really looking forward to running at Santa Anita because this horse trained like a monster on the dirt, and it was just bad timing that it took him long enough to mature that he had to run on the cushion track at Del Mar when the track shifted. So now he's be happy to be back on dirt, and he doesn't think the distance will be a problem. This horse won't be a Derby horse pedigree-wise, but 1 1/16 miles is anybody's guess, and he should be perfectly good enough for it.
And another thing checking a box is that it was a very big field for Del Mar.
It was a huge field for a 2-year-old race. I think there was about 12 horses in it, and it was a complete. I mean, it looked like we're prepping for the Arc de Triomphe. It was just ragtag muscling, and there's 2-year-olds not new. You know, these are unraced, not untested 2-year-olds. Most have had 1 run, 2 runs if you're lucky. There was a filly thrown in for good measure who likes to bite. So it was not an easy race. And the weird thing is this horse went off 7-1. No Baffert 2-year-old in a stakes race goes off at 7-1, but there was enough other hype horses on it that you got a good price. You won't get a good price on him again.
There are 2 things we have to quickly mention about the juvenile, indeed with regard to all the 2-year-old races. But first of all, we're going to mention another horse, and then we're going to mention about a big rule change for this year's Breeders' Cup. First of all, we ought to talk about the other talking horse, the other big 2-year-old, with the Todd Pletcher trainee.
There's a Todd Pletcher trainee out in New York. He's by Arch, and he won his maiden race impressively, and the thing to know about him was he was the huge talking horse, kind of like Mars for Aidan O'Brien was before he came, or Camelot, or even Frankel to an extent. And his pedigree suggests he can get any distance on dirt. The problem is, as he's Todd Pletcher, he was based in New York. He can't really do the California ship. But also the interesting thing is, the Breeders' Cup 2-year-old races this year are drug-free. So there will be no Lasix. That's the main thing. So European 2-year-olds coming over, they can say there'll be more of a level playing field. But the hard thing, the thing to look for is a lot of the American horses now, 2-year-olds, are running on Lasix, and it'll be anyone's guess how they react to not running on Lasix. So that's going to be a big question. I mean, probably 99% you won't see a difference, but there may be an instance where one runs better or one just doesn't run very, very well. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. No Lasix for the 2-year-olds this year in Breeders' Cup.
We're going to take a look at your last horse to follow in a moment, but I just wanted to follow up on Todd Pletcher. He's one of the trainers you've got to be very careful from a negative point of view about going into a Santa Anita Breeders' Cup. Yes,
Todd Pletcher is one of the winningest, most, like all the big name American trainers, they very much farm Breeders' Cup races. And Todd Pletcher, normally on any given day, particularly juvenile races, you'd back him. But Todd Pletcher's record in California is atrocious, mainly because he trains out of New York, so most of his horses are based out of New York, and shipping to Kentucky is similar enough to New York, but they just cannot handle the cool weather of a New York fall to come into the hot weather. He actually doesn't run that many, and the ones that they do don't tend to perform up to Pletcher's spec.
So we'll avoid him, but obviously trainers to watch out for are Bob Baffert. But the other trainer you've very much got to keep the right side of is Richard Mandella. You remember the line from Tom Durkin, of course, at the last Dirt Breeders' Cup. Was it 3.5? Was it 4? Because of course he had 4 winners. One of them was a dead heat, and you've managed to dig out a Dick Mandella horse. You had to. I mean, he's just a standing dish. Who have you come up with?
I've come up with a horse called Sri Lanka, which is actually a Wertheimer horse, which I thought was very, very interesting. Ironically, she's a 2-year-old filly. She's by Pleasantly Perfect, who was arguably Mandella's best horse. He won a Breeders' Cup Classic for him in 2003. Mandella himself has 2 wins in the juvenile fillies, both at Santa Anita. Actually, all 6 of his Breeders' Cup wins have been at Santa Anita. Not when it's dirt, not when it was polytrack. He kind of sat those years out. This Sri Lanka is still a maiden. Came in 4th in her maiden. on turf running a mile, and then came in second in a group race, running a mile on the turf. And now going back to Santa Anita, she's in the Oak Leaf Stakes, which has now been renamed the Chandelier Stakes. It's a Grade 1. It's a mile and a 16th on the dirt. Given her breeding, her workouts on the dirt, and given that it's Dick Mandella, I wouldn't be surprised if the longer this horse goes and on dirt, this horse should just blossom, break her maiden, get a Group 1. End of the day.
I mean, we shouldn't lose faith in Richard Mandella, because he's done this in the past. He tends to have years when he goes very quiet, and he's had a couple of really quiet years, and his stringers and stock have dwindled down, but he's still getting the support of the right owners. He still have the Wertheimers. This is one of these horses that might just bubble under, that even the Americans might not necessarily grab hold of.
Well, no, because he's not been the sexy name in Californian racing for a long time. When it went to Polytrack, the likes of Baffert, Darren Miller, even Lucas to an extent kept going. He just fell off. He still had a couple turf horses every now and then, but now not only does he have the Wertheimers, he has Claiborne. He's got a lot of the big stud farms coming back to him, so he's going to have a lot of really great horses coming up. So if not just for this race, for the future, Dick Mandella at California, we may see a resurgence.
Okay, then there's one other horse that we're going to mention with regard to the horses to watch out for. We've left her until last because she is a horse who's already a Breeders' Cup champion. It's a grey filly called Tapit Fly. She's trained at Churchill Downs by Dale Romans. I know it's a horse and indeed connections you know a great deal about, Rachel, and tell us a little bit about Tapit Fly and specifically where you think she might go as opposed to where it appears most people think she might go.
Okay, the interesting thing about Tapit Fly is she definitely has course form and Breeders' Cup form. She won the 2009 Juvenile Fillies at Santa Anita in a really, really exciting stalk pounce win on the line. That was in 2009. She was injured and took her entire 3-year-old career off. She was brought back to mild success as a 4-year-old. She had some staked place efforts, which I guess you can, from a breeding point of view, great. There's your black type, fine. As a 5-year-old this year, she's finally come into herself. She won her first graded race, because back then the Juvenile Fillies turf wasn't graded. The Grade 2 Honey Fox at Gulfstream, and then she came out and finally broke her Group 1 duck, so to speak, with Belmont in June in the Just a Game Stakes at a mile. That was an absolutely impressive time. She came close to breaking spectacular mile or elusive qualities track record, so she's no slouch. It wasn't an easy race, and the interesting thing is she is currently, with some firms, 25-1 for the Filly and Mares Breeders' Cup turf, which is over a mile and a quarter. This horse has never won over a mile and a 16th. So I'm putting her up for the Breeders' Cup mile. I wouldn't be surprised if she goes. I know the owner. She's going to be sold at the Keeneland sales at the end of this year, because he doesn't want to keep her as a brood mare, and he's already gotten one paid holiday to California out of her. She'll definitely try and do it again, but he also knows he wants to go in with a shot. She can go out on the front end. She can hold her speed. I don't think she's good enough to hold off the runs of some of the best Euros or even some of the not-so-good Americans, but it'd be worth a try.
Okay, that's Tapit Fly. She's already been to a Santa Anita Breeders' Cup and she has won once. Therefore, as we come towards the end of this chat, going into the Breeders' Cup now, we've talked about the horses that we want to look out for. We've talked about the things you need to win. I'm not going to ask you for necessarily a pick, but at the moment, the horses that we're talking about that we really should keep the right side on. Questing for Godolphin, yes, who seems to be a standout in the Distaff division. Other horses, maybe Richard's Kid at huge prices. Would he be like the classic long shot at the moment, still with a long time to go? Yeah,
because in the Classic you very much have two camps. You have the Californian-based camp and the New York-based camp, and I really do think the Californian, simply because it's a home turf advantage, will get higher in the placings than New York-based horses, and Richard's Kid is right now the number 2 Californian running around. So I would actually, on top of that, right now at 7-1, I'd put a little bit on Game On Dude, because if he makes it to the Breeders' Cup Classic sound, 7-1 is going to seem the biggest price in the world. You'll get 5-2, 2-1. If you're lucky, he'll go off odds on. He'll go on favorite.
Okay, then let's take a look at the horses that Rachel's put up once again as her horse watch list for the home team, the Americans, questing a standout in the distaff division for Kieran McLaughlin and Godolphin, contested in the fillies and mares sprint for Bob Baffert. The big 2-year-old from California is Bob Baffert's Rolling Fog. Tapit Fly, who has a couple of possibles for her on the turf, and Sri Lanka for Dick Mandella, the standing dish trainer at a Californian Breeders' Cup.